Jen Flanz is executive producer and showrunner for The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Now, you've been with the show in some capacity for more than 20 years now, but this year, of course, was unprecedented for basically the entire entertainment industry. So first off, like, what was that week like as coronavirus was spreading and it leading up to the point where the show had to stop taping in the studio? Like, was that an incredibly crazy, overwhelming week?
Yeah, it was overwhelmingly intense in a way that I have never. I mean, we've gone on the road for conventions. I worked at the show during 9/11. Like, there's just like big events that have come and gone while I'm at the Daily Show, and I've learned from all of them, you know, in the way that we handle them and things like that. And this was just like a whole new challenge of how do we protect our staff? How do we protect our audience? How seriously do we take this? Because there was so much misinformation out that first week. How quickly is it spreading? How does it spread? And so yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. But I always say that the day the Daily Show gets boring, I'll have to leave, and it has not. And 2020 has proven that I might never leave.
Yeah, boredom is something that would be a welcome relief at some point. Did you know that you always wanted to do the show remotely after you ended up having to leave the studio? Was that something that you decided like right away? How do we do this?
Oh my God. Well, we had actually just told everyone that we had off on Friday. We're like, let's work from home on Friday, so it's less commuting, less spreading, whatever, and we'll just do the show without an audience starting on Monday, thinking that in some way that was controlling it. And so on Thursday night, we all left the office like, okay, see you Monday, everybody. We'll just like do emails tomorrow. And I grabbed a bag and I didn't clean out my fridge. We did not leave the office thinking we were going to be making the show from home at all. That was by Saturday. We were like, okay, how do we do this, and originally we just leaned on we have a pretty robust digital and social team, and we put out a lot of content that way. So we are set up in some ways to, spring into action. So we were like, oh, we'll just put out videos until we can go back to the studio, like short Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and we won't do the show until we're back in the studio. We'll just put out a lot of stuff on social, because a lot of our viewers tend to watch it everywhere. They don't only watch on linear. So that made it easy to start putting things together. And then once we realized we were not going to go back to the studio for a very long time, we were like, okay, we got to figure out how to translate this, our skills in social and digital, to fully making an episode that can air on linear. And how do we get it to air, and then all the technical stuff started to come into play. It wasn't as easy as just throwing a video up on Instagram. So.
And, among the, in addition to the logistical challenges that come with trying to do a show remotely, and I think The Daily Show was one of the first, if not the first, major late night shows to really come back onto linear with their distant programming. But you're also doing it without an audience, which, that feedback and that reaction and interaction is so much a part of what a lot of late night comedy across the board is. So, like, what was the thought process around kind of reshaping comedy for no longer having a studio audience to make it translate?
Yeah, I mean, we were, sorry, there's horns. This is a New York City interview. I don't know if you can hear it, I'm sorry. I live over 2nd Avenue, basically. The basic, the thought process was just that we didn't want to feel that we realized that we had to write and produce the show differently because the audience wasn't going to be there. And we did start thinking about that a little bit before, because we were thinking that starting Monday we wouldn't have an audience. But we did not come up with this like editing style and writing style until we were in it. I think if you watch the shows back, you can see that it evolved on air over the course of like 2 weeks before we kind of found our footing. And you know, Trevor, and like I said, we take in a lot of digital media, so there's a lot of like YouTuber tricks to our editing right now, and kind of pulling the air out of places that you might wait for a laugh in the studio. There's some jokes that we've told that I think would get a huge groan in the studio, and it's been kind of fun to do those. Although if I had to trade it, I would go back to having an audience any day, because it is really so satisfying to hear people laugh immediately in the moment and get that like immediate feedback.
And one of the impressive things about it, the way that the show has evolved virtually, is how Trevor Noah has kind of become this one-man band of comedy. Like he's doing these bits, you know, he's doing these asides and all of the stuff from his own home. Like, what was it like developing that? Because that too has evolved over time. We've seen that get a little bit more, you know, streamlined and perfected as things went on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that has been, because, you know, you start, like I said, like boredom is like death. It's like, so we, you know, we started to get a little more playful. I think once we realized that we were going to be doing it like this for a while, we started to think of new ways to break out of the box. Our editors have been incredible, and, you know, our graphics team, like just coming up with new and interesting ways to like make the show look cool. I think everybody is, it's like when you're in a war together, like we're all so excited to help each other figure it out. And I think, you know, everybody has come at this. Our field team has been doing really interesting things, and they can't go in the field. So it's like people are just coming up with really creative ways to tackle the new world, that we're living in. And yeah, sorry, did that answer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as someone who, yeah, I was mentioning before we started recording this that I've been doing interviews like this for a while, and I know the scourge of Wi-Fi every once in a while in these sorts of situations can be unpredictable. Doing a nightly show every week with multiple segments, bringing in contributors and interview guests, and yeah, are there ever like technical hiccups like that come to play?
Yes, like I would say at least once a day. So you get on the phone in the morning, and it's like me, Trevor, David Kabuka, Jibun, Prang, Dan and Myra, and Daniel Radash, and that's a lot of our supervisor producers and head writer. And we basically get on the call, and it's like it's a comedy routine in itself. Like, Dan's headsets never work. Jubin's mic is way too loud. My Wi-Fi is terrible and drops in and out. I can't tell you how many times I drop off the FaceTime. It is a comedy in itself, just getting everyone together.
And bringing in these impressive guests that you've had in the last few months, Anthony Fauci, Andrew Cuomo, Joe Biden recently. How's the booking process changed and arranging these, especially these high-profile interviews that you've done?
Yeah. Well, first, I was just going to say, our Dr. Fauci interview did have technical hiccups in it. That was like I think it was like the second week back on the air, and our editors, wow, we almost didn't get the show up. They were fixing up until the very last second. We almost were feeding live. It was crazy. We're like, this is the big interview. We have to get it out there. But of course, that was the one that like the lipstick was off. But that's, I mean, luckily with the technical stuff, the audience has been, I think, been very forgiving of like the quality, not being studio quality. But with the bookings, I mean, we've been really lucky. I think just Dr. Fauci wanting to talk to Trevor because our show reaches a different audience that they wanted to make sure heard about the virus and how to prevent the spread of it was a really big win for us. And that's, a tribute to Trevor having this amazing point of view and doing interviews where I think people feel comfortable coming on the show, and it's going to be a smart and fun, not probably too intense, but still, quality interview, and that our audience is pretty vast and diverse, and I think that people realize, there's a lot of people that want to reach our audience specifically, and that and they like talking to Trevor. He's a very enjoyable person to talk to, and he truly is just an inquisitive person by nature. And so I think the interviews feel really genuine and honest, and I think that has attracted a lot of guests.
And in addition to doing the show remotely now, you've recently expanded to 45 minutes for each show. What was that decision like, and how, there's no trouble given the news cycle filling an extra 15 minutes of airtime, but how much more work goes into a show that way?
This is a little behind the scenes, but I'm going to tell you what happened. Basically, we were shooting every night. We were shooting every night the same amount we would want to shoot in the studio, maybe a little more because there's so much news. But but usually when we're in the studio, we're able to cut our interviews down a lot for the linear version, and then put the whole interview online. And it's a very easy process, and we always do 2 cuts of the interview. And when in this setup, it is impossible to do 2 cuts, and it became how do you cut down Andrew Cuomo to 5 minutes? We just did a 30-minute interview with him, so so basically it really is it was so that we didn't have to lose the written content up top or our field or correspondence, and also didn't have to compromise the interview. So we asked the network for some extra time. That's basically it. It's a little bit, it was to make it a little bit easier to edit it down, and also to not short these guests. When we're getting such big names, it was seemed like a waste to try and get them down to 5 minutes.
It's a challenge that late night shows and topical comedy shows have dealt with for basically the last 20 years now, is sort of balancing tone with, a lot of times what's in the news is not that funny or hard to put in that comic lens. And certainly, first of all, you have coronavirus, which is difficult enough, and then you get the George Floyd killing and the protests that followed there, and it puts comedians and late night shows in such a difficult position, a really good opportunity to kind of frame these things, but also a big challenge. What were your thoughts when that whole thing happened, the protests started happening on top of coronavirus, on top of everything else?
Yeah, I was okay, the world's exploding, but we're going to still make a TV show. No, I think, it was incredibly sad. I think everybody was, and it was kind of a moment of feeling just hopeless. And when that all broke out, it's, work was my second thought. It was just incredibly sad. And then it was okay, well, let's get to it. We got to make a show. And I was happy that these are conversations that we've been having at the show since Trevor took over, on air, in the room. So it wasn't a huge stretch to start talking about race on the show, because it wasn't starting to talk. We've been talking about it for almost 5 years now. So the George Floyd stuff, while it was hard because tonally I don't know. I think we try and gauge it by how we are feeling. And by we, I mean, the room of our morning meeting, which usually is like 40 of us and is now down to like 5 of us, but there's like 6 different 5-person meetings going on, but really just figuring out like, how do we feel about this? Are we ready to laugh about it? And like those first few days of Corona, and definitely the first few days of protest, it was like, no, but we're not ready to laugh about it. And until you find something funny, like Trump wearing a mask, we're not wearing a mask, or you know, like he's top of mind always, so I'll leave it there. But until you find that funny moment, it's hard to make these situations funny for anybody. And so I think that, you know, the first few nights of Corona, we just wanted to match our audience's emotion and our emotion, and go out there with an honest take on how we were feeling. And then, you know, you slowly get into making jokes and finding the funny and finding great footage of people doing hilarious things, and you're just like, okay, all right, let's make jokes. And we're a comedy show first, and you know, Trevor's a comedian, and it's hard to sit in that sadness for too long for anybody that does comedy. So it's kind of like a remedy to it, you know, to be able to laugh together about things.
Yeah, and you know, as hard as the decision was to go remote on the show, and all the challenges that go into that, I can't imagine what the decision process would be like when to go back. Because we're in phase 2, then we're in phase 3, maybe we'll go back to 2. Other places in the country are open up and they're spiking, and our numbers are like. Do you have any kind of game plan in place for if and when and how the show would eventually transition back?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a Viacom CBS task force. I've been in touch personally with the other late night showrunners. Everyone's trying to figure it out, because you want to get back to working together. This is adequate. And I like the show we're putting out. I'm very proud of it. But I think we all miss sitting in a room together and joking. And I think you do miss some of the incredible moments that you could have on the show just from not bouncing things off each other in a room. So yeah, everybody wants to get back. We want our crew back in the studio. But health comes first, and safety. And it just is something that we feel really strongly about making sure is, you know, safe. And the state, we are not skirting any phases. We are like, if we're phase 4, we'll be phase 4 as much as we want to get back, you know. So we're just waiting to see when that is. And in the meantime, you know, we've been preparing each time that we think we would be able to go back, but it is all under the umbrella of when it is safe, we'll do it.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the show and the show you've been able to put out since quarantine, and fingers crossed for the future of basically the Earth.
It's like the future of the world. I'm mostly. Oh my God, I know, seriously. I mean, when we get through Corona and the Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff, we'll have to remember about global warming. So I don't know.
Yeah, that thing that's been on the literal back burner is still burning.
There's just so much, but in the now, you know, we'll just keep bringing the show and hoping that people like it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This was great.